The arrival of the Divine Council Commander, Alina Vasquez, was drinking her morning coffee on the bridge of the research vessel Meridian when the impossible happened. Through the main view screen, she watched as massive golden ships materialized from nothing across human space. The vessels were unlike anything in the galactic database. Each one stretched 4 kilometers and pulsed with energy that made nearby stars flicker like candles in a storm. Alina had spent 15 years exploring the outer colonies, mapping new worlds where humans could build better lives. She had seen strange alien technologies and encountered species that defied understanding, but nothing had prepared her for what appeared before her eyes. The golden ships seemed to be made of liquid light that had been frozen into solid form. Strange symbols covered their hulls, glowing and shifting as if alive. The first transmission came on every frequency simultaneously. The voice that spoke was not heard through communication devices, but seemed to resonate directly inside the minds of every human being in the galaxy. It was a voice like distant thunder mixed with the sound of wind through ancient trees, carrying authority that made people stop whatever they were doing and listen. The being that spoke called itself Axiom Prime, speaker for the Divine Council. According to this entity, humanity had committed a crime against the natural order of the universe. The species had been permitted to exist on their birth world of Earth, but they had violated cosmic law by spreading to other planets and star systems. This expansion had disrupted something called the universal balance, which these beings claimed to have maintained for millions of years. Alina felt her blood turn cold as Axiom Prime explained that humanity had exactly 96 hours to abandon all colony worlds and return to Earth. Once there, they would surrender all advanced technology and return to a primitive agricultural existence under the guidance of the Divine Council. Any humans who refused would face what the being called eternal correction, which sounded far worse than simple death, to demonstrate their power. The Council selected Ganymede Station, one of humanity's oldest research outposts. Alina watched in horror as streams of golden energy reached across space and touched the station's metallic hull. The entire facility, along with its 3,000 inhabitants, simply transformed into pure light and vanished. Where the station had orbited Jupiter's moon, there was now nothing but empty space and fading golden particles. The demonstration continued as Axiom Prime selected a small asteroid that mining crews had been working. The space rock was about the size of a city block and contained enough rare metals to supply a dozen worlds. With what seemed like casual effort, the Council made the asteroid fold in on itself, until it became a perfect sphere of mirror-bright material that reflected light from impossible angles. On Earth, President Sarah Martinez called an emergency session with leaders from all 47 human colonies. The meeting was held through quantum communication links that allowed real-time discussion across interstellar distances. The debate was fierce and desperate as colony governors argued about their response to the ultimatum. Governor Thomas Bradley from New Olympia wanted to surrender immediately. His world had 2 million civilians, including his own grandchildren, and he argued that fighting beings with such power would be murder. Bradley pointed out that humans had no weapons that could touch enemies who could reshape matter with their thoughts. Director Amanda Jo from the mining world Prosperity disagreed completely. She argued that returning to primitive life under alien control was not really living at all. Jo had grown up in the asteroid belts where survival required constant innovation and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. She told the assembly that Humanity had not spent centuries reaching for the stars just to crawl back into caves when someone claimed divine authority over them. Dr. Marcus Chen was humanity's leading expert on alien technology and quantum physics. During the emergency meeting, he presented analysis that would change everything about how humans understood their situation. Dr. Chen had spent the past 24 hours studying every piece of data they had collected about the council ships and their demonstrations of power. His discovery was remarkable. The beings, calling themselves gods, were actually members of an ancient alien species that used technology so advanced it appeared magical to younger civilizations. They manipulated quantum fields on a massive scale, allowing them to restructure matter and energy in ways that seemed impossible. However, Dr. Chen found critical information hidden in the energy signatures of their power displays. The Council's technology required enormous amounts of energy drawn from what appeared to be pocket dimensions. The power flow showed patterns that suggested the system had built-in limitations. If the aliens were forced to use their abilities continuously or at maximum capacity for extended periods, their technology would begin to destabilize. More importantly, Dr. Chen discovered that the Council's power worked by imposing their will on quantum fields through focused mental energy. This meant their abilities were strongest when dealing with predictable, orderly systems. Chaos and randomness seemed to interfere with their control, requiring them to expend much more energy to achieve the same results. Alina received classified orders to gather intelligence on council ship movements while staying hidden. Her research vessel was equipped with the most advanced sensors humanity had developed, and she was positioned to observe one of their main fleets. What she saw gave her both hope and terror in equal measure. The council ships moved in perfect formation, like pieces in some cosmic chess game. Every vessel maintained exact distances from its neighbors, and their flight patterns followed mathematical curves that were beautiful but utterly predictable. Alina realized that these beings had become so accustomed to perfect order that they might not know how to respond to genuine chaos. On the agricultural world Haven, farmer-turned-militia leader Maria Santos organized civilian volunteers into resistance units. Maria had emigrated from Earth 20 years earlier with dreams of growing crops under alien suns. She had built a successful farm that fed thousands of colonists, but she was not willing to give up that life without a fight. Maria's volunteers included teachers, mechanics, retired military personnel, and teenagers who had never seen Earth but considered the colonies their true home. They had no military training and limited weapons, but they possessed something the Council did not expect. They were humans who refused to accept that any situation was hopeless. The colonists began converting agricultural equipment into weapon systems. Crop dusters became improvised fighter craft, and mining charges were repurposed as explosives. Maria coordinated with similar groups across dozens of worlds, sharing tactics and encouragement through quantum communication networks. As the 96-hour deadline approached, humanity faced a decision that would define their species for generations. Colony after colony held votes among their populations, and the results surprised even the most optimistic leaders. World after world chose to fight rather than surrender, often by overwhelming margins. On the industrial world, New Birmingham, factory workers voted to resist by 98%. The floating cities of Aquatica chose Defiance unanimously. Even research stations, with only a few hundred inhabitants, decided they would rather face extinction than accept slavery to beings who claimed divine authority. Alina monitored council communications as the deadline neared and detected something that sounded like confusion among the alien leaders. Axiom Prime seemed genuinely surprised that humanity was choosing resistance over survival. The being's transmissions suggested that most species in the galaxy had surrendered immediately when faced with the Council's demands. President Martinez addressed humanity with a message that would be remembered for centuries. She stood before cameras that broadcast to every human world and ship, speaking words that carried the determination of an entire species. Martinez told the Council that humanity rejected their authority completely and would fight for their freedom regardless of the cost. The response from the Council was swift and terrible. Axiom Prime's voice boomed across human space with rage that manifested as electromagnetic storms, disrupting communications on a dozen worlds. The being promised that humanity had chosen extinction over mercy and would receive exactly what they had requested. The first wave of divine punishment began as Council fleets moved toward the outer colonies. But humanity had not wasted those precious hours of preparation. Every world and every ship had been readying themselves for war in ways the Council could never have anticipated. Dr. Chen activated Project Defiance, a network of quantum resonance devices that could coordinate human forces across interstellar distances. The technology allowed instant communication and shared tactical data between all human military units, creating a unified response to the Council's attack. Alina positioned her ship to observe the first engagement between human forces and the Council fleet approaching New Olympia. What she witnessed would shatter the myth of divine invincibility and prove that gods could indeed bleed when challenged by mortals who refused to surrender. When mortals challenge eternity, the Battle of Titan Station began at exactly 1430 Colonial Standard time, when 3 Council dreadnoughts encountered humanity's hastily assembled defense fleet. Admiral Robert Kane commanded 37 human vessels ranging from military destroyers to converted cargo haulers armed with experimental weapons. Against him stood alien ships that could reshape reality with their thoughts and weapons that turned matter into pure energy. Every military manual ever written said that Kane's fleet should have been obliterated within minutes. The Council ships were each the size of small cities and protected by energy shields that bent space around them. Their weapons could erase mountains, and their technology was older than human civilization. But something unexpected happened when the shooting started. Lieutenant Sarah Park was piloting an experimental interceptor called the Hummingbird when the Council opened fire with beams that could cut through battleship armor like tissue paper. Instead of following standard evasive maneuvers, Park did something that confused the alien targeting computers. She began flying in patterns that seemed completely insane, rolling and spinning and changing direction for no apparent tactical reason. The Council's weapons kept missing her because their computers could not predict where she would go next. Their technology was designed to fight enemies who followed logical patterns and made rational decisions. Park's chaotic flying style, which looked like the movements of a drunken butterfly, was something their ancient minds could not process or counter. The discovery spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Captain Lisa Torres began ordering her entire squadron to fly in random patterns, using dice rolls and playing cards to determine their movements. The Council ships found themselves unable to target enemies who made no tactical sense, forcing them to expend enormous amounts of energy trying to hit shadows. Dr. Chen's theoretical weapons proved devastatingly effective in actual combat. Quantum cascade bombs tore holes in the fabric of space itself, creating wounds in reality that leaked energy from parallel dimensions. When the first Council dreadnought was caught in a cascade explosion, the ancient vessel cracked like an eggshell and spilled its crew into the vacuum of space. The psychological impact was incredible. Across human territory, people watched battle feeds showing something that should have been impossible. The beings who called themselves gods were bleeding and dying like any other enemy. The golden ships that had seemed invincible were breaking apart under human weapons that existed only in theory a week earlier. Maria Santos coordinated the ground defense of Haven when Council assault forces landed, expecting easy victory. The aliens were creatures of living crystal and coherent energy who had conquered countless worlds over millions of years. They found themselves fighting humans who refused to follow any civilized rules of warfare. Maria's volunteers had spent days building weapons from farm equipment and industrial machinery. They created electromagnetic pulse devices from tractor engines and turned crop fertilizer into high explosives. When the crystalline warriors descended, expecting to face cowering primitives, they met children throwing acid bombs and elderly farmers piloting suicide drones into enemy formations. The Battle of Haven lasted 8 days and became a legend that inspired human resistance across the galaxy. Teachers fought alongside mechanics, and teenagers stood beside grandparents in defense of their homes. The colonists used tactics that no military academy had ever taught because they were not soldiers, they were simply humans who refused to be enslaved. Alina discovered something crucial while monitoring Council communications during the siege. The aliens were having difficulty maintaining their power levels during prolonged combat. Their technology drew energy from pocket dimensions, but the process required perfect mental focus and emotional stability. Human chaos and unpredictability was forcing them to work much harder than they had ever experienced. Dr. Chen analyzed the data. Alina provided and made a breakthrough that would change the course of the war. The Council's power source had a critical weakness. Their dimensional energy tap required harmonic resonance between multiple ships to remain stable. If humans could disrupt that resonance at exactly the right frequency, the entire network would collapse. Working around the clock, Chen's team developed a weapon they called the Harmony Breaker. The device would send quantum pulses designed to create interference in the Council's power grid. If it worked, every Council ship in a star system would lose power simultaneously. If it failed, humanity would have revealed their best weapon for nothing. Operation Prometheus launched when human forces were down to their last reserves and many colonies had already fallen. Every surviving human ship converged on the Council's main fleet in the Proxima system where Axiom Prime commanded from his massive flagship. The alien vessel was larger than most asteroids and pulsed with energy that distorted space around it. Admiral Kane led the desperate assault with ships held together by determination and spare parts. His fleet included damaged warships, converted civilian vessels, and experimental craft that had never been tested in combat. Against them stood the concentrated might of beings who had ruled the galaxy for eons. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Human ships danced through energy beams that could vaporize planets, while alien vessels tried to target enemies, who moved like leaves in a hurricane. Dr. Chen's Harmony Breaker charged slowly as the fleet fought to keep it alive long enough to fire. Alina piloted her research vessel through the chaos, using her sensors to guide the weapon's targeting system. She watched human ships sacrifice themselves to protect the device, while Council forces threw everything they had at stopping humanity's final gambit. When the Harmony Breaker fired, the effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Council fleet. Every golden ship in the system suddenly went dark as their power networks collapsed. The ancient vessels, deprived of the energy that kept them functional, began drifting helplessly through space. Axiom Prime's voice rang out across the battlefield one final time, filled with something humans had never heard before. Fear, the being who had claimed divine authority, was suddenly mortal and vulnerable, watching his invincible fleet reduced to floating debris by creatures he had dismissed as primitive animals. The Council's retreat was swift and complete. The surviving golden ships disappeared into whatever dimension they had emerged from, but not before Axiom Prime delivered a final warning. Other ancient powers watched the galaxy, and humanity's victory would draw their attention. The young species had proven they could challenge gods, but greater tests awaited them among the stars. Maria Santos stood in the ruins of Haven's main settlement and looked up at stars that belonged to humanity once again. Around her, colonists were already beginning to rebuild what the Council had destroyed. The farms would grow again, the cities would rise from their ashes, and children would play under alien suns. President Martinez addressed the galaxy from Earth, speaking words that would echo through history. She declared that humanity would never again bow to those who claimed authority through power alone. The species that had crawled from caves and reached for the stars had proven that no force in the universe could extinguish the human spirit. Elena received new orders to explore beyond the rim of known space, searching for other ancient civilizations that might threaten human freedom. Her ship had been upgraded with the best technology humanity could produce, and her crew included volunteers who had fought against impossible odds and won. Dr. Chen established the Institute for Quantum Defense, dedicated to developing weapons and shields that could protect humanity from threats beyond current understanding. His laboratories would work to unlock the secrets of technologies so advanced they seemed like magic, ensuring that humans would never again face extinction unprepared. The war against the Divine Council ended, but humanity's greatest adventures were just beginning. They had proven that mortals could challenge gods and win through courage, creativity, and the refusal to accept defeat. Whatever ancient powers lurked in the darkness between stars would find that humans were no longer the frightened species that had once huddled around fires in caves. They were the people who had fought gods and won, and they were ready for whatever came next. Asterisk.